Welcome back to part 2 of double bass for electric bassists. In this video, we're going to get down and practical and start playing a little bit. Yeah! But first of all, let's talk about correct posture. How to hold the instrument in a good way. There's basically two ways for you to play the instrument. Standing or sitting. I suggest in the start that you go for one or the other for a while. If you choose to stand, find a relaxed position with your weight evenly distributed between your feet. Make sure both heels are firmly planted on the floor. Now, take note of this position and how it feels and pick your bass up. You want to have the bass at the height where when it's standing 90 degrees, that your eye level is about the same level as the F or F sharp on the E string. Lean the bass in towards your body. Let this corner here touch your belly and lean slightly over. You should be able to find a comfortable position. Your fingering arm should not have to be lifted too high. If you feel you have to lift it unnaturally high, then you probably have to lower your end pin. The thing about standing is that you're kind of free to move about a little bit. That's the positive side of standing. I mean, when you're into the groove, it's like you're not restricted to a chair. The negative thing about standing is that you kind of have to hold on to your instrument. You can't really let go with both hands. It will fall. You can balance it, obviously, sort of, but it's gonna fall. So you could put your left leg in front like this, but then you're like standing in this kind of position, and that's not pleasant for a long period of time. So that's the drawback to it. Now let's take a look at sitting. If you decide to sit, I suggest you get an adjustable high stool, like this one. This is a Koenig & Meyer bass stool, and I'll link to it in the description. It's adjustable in height as well as tilt of the seat. It also includes an adjustable double footrest, which is very handy, as I'll show you soon. It folds completely flat, so it's quite practical, although still on the larger size to carry around. I prefer to sit at a height where I can comfortably have both my heels on the floor. I use a left footrest so I can lean the bass towards my left knee. Like this. So I can let go and it's not going anywhere. It's resting on my knee. It's totally in balance. And the same as when standing. When the instrument is standing straight up and you're straight in your back, you should have your eye level around F sharp on the E string. Like that. This way, when you lean it in, you have a natural position. You don't have to lift your arm above your shoulder to get to the lowest positions. And you can comfortably pluck around the end of the fingerboard. The pros and cons of sitting are, as obviously as I mentioned, this bass is not going anywhere. I can let go. I don't have to hold the instrument physically. And that opens up a bit more freedom with what you do with your, obviously with your arms. I can get around here and do all kinds of weird stuff if I need to. I mean, that wouldn't work while standing. Your bass would be in 1,000 pieces and off to the left of the stage. The obvious drawback is you're not as mobile, but you can move around still. One thing to be aware of when sitting, although it can happen while standing too, is that the bass on certain surfaces might decide to go solo and try to slip away from you. I've had my share of tuning pegs getting forcefully planted in my shoulder muscles.
It's never pleasant, I can assure you. It's also no fun to spend rehearsals or gigs chasing the bass around stage. I guess it probably can add some entertainment value, but nah. You can solve this by buying or making an anchor for the end pin. You attach this to your chair and you'll be safe. You can get a commercially made one like this, or you can go the DIY route with this kind of thing. I'll link the commercial one below. I use a rubber ball like this one. It served me well for a number of years, although it can still get slippery on certain surfaces, especially if it gets dirty. For me, I like best to sit on the carpet, preferably one with a rubber base on it. This, in combination with the rubber ball, is quite foolproof. And now, let's finally get down to some playing. I want to start by focusing on the plucking hand. There's quite a big difference between the electric and upright bass when it comes to how we approach the instrument with our plucking hand. On the electric bass, the strings are horizontal to us. You naturally get a close to 90-degree angle from your plucking hand to the string, and you pluck with the fingertips. On the double bass, on the other hand, the strings are vertical, and when you extend the plucking hand towards the strings, it falls quite natural in quite a parallel position to the strings. This means that rather than using our fingertips like on the electric bass, it's most natural physically to strike the strings with the side of our fingers. If we try to play with a 90-degree angle and on our fingertips, we have to make quite an unnatural position with our plucking arm and kind of a bent wrist. Can you see that? Yeah. It's not very ergonomic, and there's also quite a difference in the sound between the side of the fingers and the tips, as I'll demonstrate. The most natural position for the plucking hand is then to simply extend the arm to the fingerboard, contact the end of the fingerboard with the inside of the thumb, and strike the string with the side of the index finger, including some movement of the lower arm. Try to use the first quarter of the index finger as your contact point. Let's compare this sound to the sound we get when playing with the fingertips. The side of the finger gives a more full-bodied sound. The fingertips sound quite noticeably thinner, with less low end. At first, it can seem unnatural to pluck in this position, especially when using more than one finger. It's easy to feel like the fingers trip over each other, and it can feel quite clumsy, like... But stay with it, and it will get gradually more natural. If it feels very difficult, experiment with angling your hand slightly to give more space for the middle finger when alternating. Find a position that feels comfortable and when you're still getting a full-bodied sound. There's yet another way to pluck, and that's combining the index and middle finger into one unit. You get kind of the same amount of contact with the string as when you're playing strictly on the side of the index finger. This works well in slow to medium tempos, and it lets you have access to a closer to the 90-degree angle when needed for faster passages. There's a 90-second technique video here on my channel that demonstrates this technique. Please check it out, link below. Of course, certain times it's totally fine to play with the fingertips and a more 90-degree angle of your plucking hand. For instance, if you like to play high register fast solos, you might prefer projection and facility over full-bodied bass tone during this. You can then return to the more full-bodied sound when you finish the solo. Or maybe the 16th note based funky bass line works best with a slimmer, more articulated tone. Whichever variation you end up choosing as your main way of plucking, try to focus on getting an even sound from note to note. Avoid unwanted accents and make sure each note speaks and projects in a consistent way across the range of the instrument as well as from string to string.
I've put together an exercise using only open strings to get used to this new way of plucking. You might want to incorporate some of these in your daily routine. So, let's check it out.
We're going to play open string exercises for the right hand. This is just an example. You can make your own up if you want, but this kind of has most permutations in it. So when you run through these every day, you'll kind of condition your right hand for correct plucking technique on the upright bass. So we're going to consider each string in turn as the root. With the root, I mean the main note. So the exercise is we start with the E as a root, as a main note, and we play our rhythm group on the E, then on the A string, back to the E string, to the D string, back to the E string, to the G string. So if we play eighth notes, it will sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the first part of the exercise. Now we move it, we start on the A string. We do it the same way. We start on the A string, continue to the D, back to the A, G, back to the A, finally down on the E and back to the A. So it will be. The D string as a main note. And finally the G string as a main note. And that was the exercise with an eighth note pattern. 4 eighth notes before we change strings. We can vary that, and I suggest you do the following variations. We start like we just did. And then the first variation would be 2 and 2 notes. So from the E, and so on the A, etc. around the exercise. The next variation would be 1 low note, 2 high notes, 1 low note. So etc. Then 3 low notes, 1 high note. Etc. And then 1 low note, 3 high notes. And we can vary it with also incorporating triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can vary this also in the same way as before. We can do 2 plus 1, so that will be. Right? And we can do 1 plus 2. The thing is here that we are getting used to the hand in this flatter position, and we're making it jump around the bass in as many different ways as it can, really, because we get all the permutations here when we do the whole exercise.
I hope you got a lot out of the information presented in this video. Remember to practice these plucking drills every day. They'll feel like second nature soon enough. In the next video, we're going to tackle the fingering hand and basic position playing on the double bass. We'll examine the main differences in fingering techniques on the double bass compared to the bass guitar. This is a very important topic. I'll see you there.